a lot of people in this group were there. So that was really cool to see some of you in person after seeing you online for so long. And we had margaritas / daiquiris and other drinks and hors d'oeuvres and stuff. So it was a lot of fun. And it was, we're still learning what is going to be acceptable and tolerable and comfortable for people, but we're going to do our best to start opening up. And I think, again, one of the big questions is how do we keep the place clean? But we did stream the service, and I was a little concerned because the way we set up the cameras, we didn't really set them up so that they would face that low. So I think what we're going to do in the future is either do services from up top. It was kind of nice. They wanted to do services down below. They didn't want to do them from behind the bema, but we may still have to move the bema off and then have them, whoever is singing will sing from up there. So yeah, it is a work in progress, and obviously we're dealing with introducing some new voices in the midst of also just getting everybody back in the same place. So a lot of excitement, a lot of good things, I hope, but yeah, it's going to take time. So please extend us some patience and some understanding that we're trying to keep everybody happy, which is impossible. So we're not going to keep everybody happy, because even within a family, you have different feelings about what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. And quite frankly, if we're really honest with ourselves, we go back and forth internally, individually on what we feel comfortable with. And I think one of the interesting things is right as recognizing that and coming to terms with it. On one hand, sometimes we feel hypocritical and illogical, but the reality is, as human beings, as we know from Star Trek, are illogical, and we do silly things. And I think one of the things that this pandemic has taught us is made us see that even more in a more obvious way, that we do things that don't make sense, and we change. And I think hopefully we become accepting of ourselves and accepting then consequently of others, to recognize that we change, and that one day we feel one way and one day we feel the other, and that's just the way we are.
I wonder how the planet Vulcan would have handled
with the pandemic. It would have lasted 2 minutes. They would have isolated the issue, probably put the people under quarantine, and it would not have affected Vulcan the way it affected us. On the other hand, they have that thing every
All Saints opened up Sunday in a limited way,
yeah.
but only 300 people inside the church, everyone wearing masks. There was no communal singing. There were 4 members of the choir singing with masks on. There was instrumental music. People were banded with green bands, red bands, or yellow bands. Green bands meant people were huggable. Red band said stay away, but everyone wore a mask, and part of the service was televised outside for people who were not ready to be inside of a building. So it's proceeding with great caution.
Well, thank you for telling us that, Reverend Lynn, because that's obviously one of the leading, largest, whatever. It's a flagship, right? It's kind of a flagship for your movement. So I think that's good to know, and it's obviously a fairly progressive and what's the right word? I think they embrace science there. I think that's part of that's a nice way of saying it, that they've embraced. They understand the role of spirituality, but they also understand the role that science and logic.
As a matter of fact, in the congregation is an epidemiologist who's been sort of helping to kind of lay out the framework for this. So,
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
We chose to go to breakfast with our children, but
oh, that's a nice thing too. When it's a holiday, he had a nice Father's Day. So I hope people, I forgot to wish people Father's Day at services. I meant to do it. Like I had a note to write it down. I wrote it down to like, if it had been Mother's Day, I would have said it. I promise you, but I didn't. And it just goes to show you that fathers need to be reminded that, whatever Father's Day is fathers need to be recognized as well, and should deserve to be right, should do what they need to do and deserve to be recognized when they do. So anyways, fathers, the unsung heroes, I don't know what you're gonna say. Sometimes they don't deserve to be, but when they do, they mothers too, for that matter. Anyways, but I totally forgot to, as a father, I totally forgot to recognize fathers. Anyways, so we'll take a look at today. We're going to look at the priesthood and what happens after as the Mishkan, as the tabernacle gets built. We're going to see what happens to the priests and their role, because interestingly enough, we don't have priests really functioning anymore in Judaism as there are in Christianity, but the clothes and the different things are very important. The different things by the ritual items and the objects are very important in the Torah. And we're going to take a look at a little bit on that and on what the priests did and how they did it. So that is the theme for today. I'm going to post this up. Last week we had some interesting pieces about the tabernacle and specifically about the Urim and Tumim and the priestly and the breastplate, the stones on the breastplate. That's what we read about last time. And the fact that these stones not only lit up, which some of you have heard, but that they actually letters on them lit up, so that God could communicate to us through the letters on the names, because each of the names for the tribes were made up of the alphabet. They had the alphabet through it, and so you could do that. So we're going to take a look at this now, which is the next section on this. And kind of the last thing we read about was that if the high priest was worthy of getting the messages, he got them. If he wasn't, it was a good way to know whether or not the high priest was worthy, because the breastplate wouldn't work for him if he wasn't. So again, it was a good way of knowing whether the guy was the priest was worthy. It's based on how good the communication was. As we talked about before, it seems to be a little bit like an oracle, which also means you have to kind of be able to interpret it. But it's kind of a little cool thing that we have here. So they're wrapping it up. So the thing is, the Mishkan has to be finished. I mean, you got to finish the construction, and then you can have the priests come in and do their work. So first step, we're going to read about the completion of that, which was building it. So Rosemary, you want to take us through this? This is kind of an interesting, couple interesting things about the timing of how long this took, etc.
On the 11th day of Tishrei, Moses assembled the people and informed them that it was God's wish to have a sanctuary among them, and each man was bidden to bring to the sanctuary any offering he pleased. At the same time, he impressed upon them that, however pious a deed participation in the construction of the tabernacle might be, still they might under no circumstances break the Sabbath to hasten the building of the sanctuary. Moses thereupon expounded to them the kind of work that was permissible on the Sabbath and the kind that was prohibited. For there were not less than 39 occupations, the pursuit of which on the Sabbath was punishable by death. Owing to the importance of keeping the Sabbath, Moses imparted the precepts concerning it directly to the great masses of the people that he had gathered together, and not to the elders alone. In this he acted according to God's command, who said to him, "Go, Moses, call together great assemblages and announce the Sabbath laws to them, that the future generations may follow your example, and on Sabbath days assemble the people in the synagogues and instruct them in the Torah, that they may know what is prohibited and what is permitted, that my name may be glorified among my children. In the spirit of this command did Moses institute that on every holy day there might be preaching in the synagogues and instruction concerning the significance of the special holy day. He summoned the people to these teachings with the words, "If you will follow my example, God will count it for you as if you had acknowledged God as your king throughout the world."
So this midrash reminds us that the Torah or Judaism derives the laws of what's prohibited work, the 39 prohibited prohibited activities on Shabbat, from what was done for the Mishkan, because as the Torah tells us, we're not allowed to do the Mishkan on Shabbat. And the things that we couldn't do for that include cutting, weaving, dyeing, washing, creating any kinds of, tanning, any kinds of these work are the prohibited malachot, the prohibited labors. And so the rabbis derive from that all the things that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat that are considered work from what was done for the Mishkan, with the logic being, if you can't build the Mishkan on those days, if you can't do those kinds of things, then you can't do the things that you're doing around the house. So chopping, any of those kinds of things. And that's where we get to, you don't cut toilet paper. And when people say, well, how do you get that? And it's because it's considered tearing, and they did tearing for the Mishkan. They tore and they cut. And so that was the idea behind pre-cutting the toilet paper, was so that you didn't cut. So that's where we derive it from. We derive it from the stuff we don't do for the Mishkan. So Shabbat becomes kind of the holiday of recognizing that no work we do can be more important than building the Mishkan. And if God didn't work on building the world that day, then again, what can we possibly do that is more important than that? So what happens is that God will give us credit for doing those kinds of things. If we keep Shabbat, it'll work out for us. We won't lose, the money or the profit or the success. If we keep Shabbat, then God will take care of us. And obviously for thousands of years, this kind of arrangement worked. It worked a lot better when Jews were only living amongst other Jews, but it's still an issue for for Jewish-owned businesses. And there are businesses that have found ways around this, right? If they don't, if they are not, if they were a Jewish-owned store like Macy's, they could figure out a way of, Macy's wasn't always owned by a Jewish family, so it wasn't always an issue, but they were never going to close Macy's for Shabbat. But there are stores in New York, for example, that are very large, very powerful in their own sectors of jewelry or electronics, for example. They're not open on Shabbat. And not only are they not open on Shabbat, before you say, well, what about the internet? One of the most successful electronic stores in the country is B&H Electronics, that we actually ordered stuff for our synagogue, B&H Photo, and they're in Brooklyn, I believe, and they're run by ultra Orthodox family, and they close on Shabbat, and their website closes on Shabbat. So you can't order during Shabbat in New York. Their website is down too, so they don't do any business on Shabbat. So there are people who still take this Shabbat prohibition. They take it very seriously. So they believe it's the secret to their success. So, all right, let's read a little bit more about Shabbat.
The stress laid on the observance of the Sabbath laws was quite necessary, for the people were so eager to deliver up their contributions that on the Sabbath Moses had to have an announcement proclaimed that they were to take nothing out of their houses, as the carrying of things on the Sabbath is prohibited. For Israel is a peculiar people that answered the summons to fetch gold for the golden calf, and with no less zeal answered the summons of Moses to give contributions for the tabernacle. They were not content to bring things out of their houses and treasuries, but forcibly snatched ornaments from their wives, their daughters, and their sons, and brought them to Moses for the construction of the tabernacle. In this way, they thought they could cancel their sin in having fashioned the golden calf. Then they had used their ornaments in the construction of the idol, and now they employed them for the sanctuary of God.
So what's interesting about this Midrash is that it kind of recognizes that they really wanted to build something. And so when they didn't, when the golden calf was the wrong thing to do, and they were told how to do it, now with the Mishkan, they went nuts for it. And the Bible does say in Exodus that the people brought so much stuff that Moses said, stop, can't bring anymore. The Midrash kind of builds on the golden calf story by saying, just as they took the stuff for the golden calf, like literally ripped it out of their kids' noses and ears and stuff, they did the same thing for the Mishkan. And they kind of say, it's peculiar that, people did that. And it begins with this kind of warning, or not warning, but, reminder that they didn't take it on Shabbat. So carrying and moving things on Shabbat from your house, for example, to an outside place is considered, it's muktzah, it's considered prohibited work, it's carrying. So you don't do that. You don't take something from your house and bring it into somebody else's house. You can put an eruv, which is the construction around something that allows you to carry or to move things within an area. It is considered to be one area. You're not moving things out of it, that eruv, and that allows people to push a stroller or to carry things on Shabbat. But some people are pretty stringent upon it and even won't carry within an eruv. So eruv is a legal fiction, and it allows for people to kind of work around the law of carrying. But the rabbis derive from the story that God, Moses didn't even let people carry stuff to the tabernacle on Shabbat. So not only construction, but also this last category, which is carrying, which is that's the easiest thing to forget you're not supposed to do, is to carry things. So now this one's an interesting one. This is one that I don't know. I think we shared it on Wednesday night, but anyways, here we go.
The women, however, were no less eager to contribute their mite and were especially active in producing the woolen hangings. They did this in so miraculous a way that they spun the wool while it was still upon the goats. Moses did not at first want to accept contributions from the women, but these brought their cloaks and their mirrors, saying, "Why do you reject our gifts? If you do so because you want in the sanctuary nothing that women use to enhance their charms, behold, here are our cloaks that we use to conceal ourselves from the eyes of the men. But if you are afraid to accept from us anything that might not be our property, but our husbands, behold, here are our mirrors that belong to us alone and not to our husbands." When Moses beheld the mirrors, he waxed very angry and bade the women to be driven from him, exclaiming, "What right in the sanctuary have these mirrors that exist only to arouse sensual desires?" But God said to Moses, "Truly, dearer to me than all other gifts are these mirrors, for it was these mirrors that yielded me my hosts. When in Egypt the men were exhausted from their heavy labors, the women were wont to come to them with food and drink, take out their mirrors, and caressingly say to their husbands, 'Look into the mirror, I am much more beautiful than you.' And in this way, passion seized the men so that they forgot their cares and united themselves with their wives, who thereupon brought many children into the world. Take now these mirrors and fashion out of them the laver that contains the water for the sanctifying of the priests. Furthermore, out of this laver was fetched the water that a woman suspected of adultery had to drink to prove her innocence. As formerly, the mirrors had been used to kindle conjugal affection, so out of them was made the vessel for the water that was to restore broken peace between husband and wife."
Yeah. So I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but I'm not positive. When we talked about the golden calf. Oh, I know what it was. So Judith had raised this issue that there she thought that there was something connected to the women who did stuff, the women who brought the midrash we read is that the women didn't want to give their gold to the golden calf, and it was an example of their piety. This is another. This was, and I said to her, this is a different. This one is actually a different one, which is that their mirrors were used for the laver, for the bowl, the big copper bowl that the priests used for their water, for the water rituals of the Mishkan. So first of all, obviously, but I will say it, these are not mirrors made with glass. They're mirrors that are made of polished metal. And so that's how they melt them down. They're not melting the glass, and they're not melting or breaking glass. They're melting the metal, and that's the way mirrors were made, with very highly polished metal. So they're melting them and they're turning them into the laver. So the weird thing about this is it shows that Moses was, or at least this midrash gives us a fairly misogynistic version of Moses. And Moses doesn't want the women's stuff around. It's not very flattering to Moses. And so instead, God actually has to intervene and say, no, this is good. This is all good stuff. So do you understand? This was so this was this was the if you will, a reward for the women beautifying themselves. Now, the weird way that they tell this is that the women don't use it. It's a weird way that they say it, because it's not that the women looked at themselves in the mirror, but made their husbands look at the mirror and say, look, don't I look a lot? It's kind of weird. Yeah. Like, look at me, I'm so pretty, and you're, so it's kind of a weird way of saying that they use their beauty to make their husbands' lives better while they were in Egypt. But this is a big issue in the Midrash, because the procreation that happens during the time of the slavery is a big issue within Judaism, because number one, it explains why there's so many Jews that leave Egypt after just a few generations. But it also the rabbis also at the same time use it to prove that the women kept their husbands' spirits and kept them feeling good about themselves while they were slaves, except it's done in a weird way, which is not the way we would necessarily say it today, which is it doesn't focus on their feeling masculine or feeling loved or feeling sexually desired, but that they had kids, and that was important for the procreation. You can get why. I mean, it's they're not focusing on, they do talk about it occasionally, sex for the purpose of pleasure, but they're really talking about the necessity of it from the purpose of procreation and keeping the people going. Because part of what the message, and we see this at Passover, we talk about it every year at the Passover Seder, that part of the purpose of giving the Jews the backbreaking labor that they had in Egypt was to stop them from procreating. That somehow, if they were working so hard, that they'd have no energy left to have sex, and therefore they would essentially work themselves into extinction. And that doesn't happen. The contrary, the people multiply and multiply. So the mirrors turn out to be a representation of that. They really show the piety of the women, which we saw earlier in the story of the golden calf, and the fact that, again, here, this object of vanity is actually turned into an object of piety. And what's more so, they add to it the fact that this same laver that has the water is the water that's used for the rule of sotah, which we just read about in the Torah in Numbers. We read about the waters of the sotah, the bitter waters, which prove a woman innocent of adultery. So when the woman takes the waters and has them with the ashes from the altar mixed together, they drink the water. If she's sinned, her uterus will fall out, her stomach something will happen to her stomach. And if she's innocent, then her husband has to forgive her. So if she's fine, she doesn't have anything happen to her. So so the rabbis point out that the laver made from mirrors ends up being used to help restore a husband and wife when they're accusing each other, or when he's accusing her of adultery. So the irony is that, or the power of this is that that's what the mirrors end up doing. So something that was assumedly for vanity is actually, it's connected, right? It's connected still to sex and to things that would lead us to thinking that it's not, it's not holy, but it is. And so in a weird way, and I think if we give our own modern interpretation to this, that it shows how this holy object over Moses's protestation is still holy, and maybe again its inherent holiness is because it was used for bringing couples together. So it's kind of a nice, like if you give the modern spin to it, it's a nice lesson about the Mishkan being built out of seemingly inconsequential and vain objects. So repurposing, recycling those things. All right. So it's a nice midrash. It's one that I mean, like, you don't have to give it in its old version. You can give it in a more modern version, which is, you can tell people that, things can find their way into being used in a holy way. All right.
When Moses, upon God's command, made it known to the people that whoever was of a willing heart, man or woman, might bring an offering, the zeal of the woman was so great that they thrust away the men and crowded forward with their gifts, so that in 2 days all that was needful for the construction of the tabernacle was in Moses' hands. The princes of the tribes came almost too late with their contributions, and at the last moment they brought the precious stones for the garments of Aaron, that they might not be entirely unrepresented in the sanctuary. But God took their delay amiss, and for this reason they later sought to be the first to offer up sacrifices in the sanctuary. After everything had been provided for the construction of the tabernacle, Bezalel set to work with the devotion of his whole soul, and as a reward for this, the Holy Scriptures speak of him only as the constructor of the sanctuary, although many others stood by him in this labor. He began his work by fashioning the boards, then attended to the overlaying of them, and when he had completed these things, he set to work to prepare the curtains, then completed the ark with the penance cover belonging to it, and finally the table for the showbread and the candlestick.
Yeah. So even though there's this midrash we read earlier, which is that he built the ark first, he didn't complete the ark until everything else had been for the actual building, for the walls and for the curtains and everything else. Then he finishes the last things, which are the objects, which would have been the logical thing. But as we said before, there was this kind of idea of you build the ark, you build the ark first, and then you build everything around it, because they use the example of God creating light first, that the Torah is represented by the ark, that you have to build that first, and then you can build everything else after that. So, but again, we have this midrash that it's not actually finished until everything else is done, and then they can kind of like close it up and bring it in. And so this was part of the logic of how of which comes first, the chicken or the egg, the ark or the tabernacle. And again, what we see in this other first part of this first midrash is that the women are the ones that really were the ones who led the way, and they basically provided everything. The women did. So there's this really interesting idea that the women were the ones who were the driving force behind building the Mishkan, that they actually, as it says, the elders, the princes of the tribes, they came in last. I mean, they almost came in too late, it says, because the women had provided everything. So the last thing that they do is the precious stones for the breastplates and for the ephod, but they almost don't get their stuff in because everything else came in. And then again, Moses says, enough, we're not going to take anymore. And so this is an interesting, again, very kind of, celebration of women when it came to the construction. Does anybody have any feelings or any ideas of why that is? It's probably better for a woman to say than for me, but does anybody it doesn't have to be a woman, but does anybody have any thoughts on why it's the women who do this?
I mean, historically, women have been active, in the temple. It was a way for them to have a role in the community outside their families.
Yeah. It's been my experience in now 20 something years. Men can oftentimes be very gracious, and it's not that men aren't, but from sheer amounts of donations and generosity to the synagogue, in my experience, we have a few guys on the line right now, I will tell you, it's the women who inevitably and numerically give to at a much higher level. And I'm not going to say that the woman who just spoke has been the primary giver for the last 20 years that I've been there, and even before. But it is. I mean, we just so you know, I give you one quick example that just happened yesterday and today. I told people Friday night that now that we are, back in the room, back inside, that we wanted to buy some more of the prayer books. And I just said it briefly. I didn't do a big pitch. I was about to do a flyer to let people know about it. A few people have donated before. I think Mike and Mary have donated books. Rosemary, I think, has donated books already. We have 40 copies of the new Reformed prayer book, Mishkan Tefillah, and it's very nice. It's a great prayer book. If they had that 20 years ago, I wouldn't have spent days and days putting together the prayer book that we've been using. So anyways, I just put it out there, and sure enough, a woman from our synagogue came up Sunday, basically the next day, said, hey, we want to buy 27 books, and $1,000 worth of books. And so we have enough books now for I think for the time being, or it's going to bring us up to about 70, 80 prayer books. And just like that, it was done. And I'm talking about this happened yesterday, over the last 2 days. So it's been my experience that women are generous at a different level. And again, sometimes I don't know what to say other than, again, it's not that men haven't been generous, but women do respond in a different way.
You think it's because for so many generations, women didn't feel as included in a lot of the synagogue business? That,
Yeah, but what did this midrash just tell us?
well, right, because, women couldn't participate in the actual sacrifices, so they needed to be,
Maybe, maybe. No, that, I mean, it's an interesting point, other than the fact that the men who made the offer, who brought these things to, also didn't get to, only the priests got to. So, I think it shows that women respond in a different way to men. And it's interesting because, it's difficult to know what women did for synagogue life for the last 2,000 years, because as you said, they've been kind of disenfranchised. So they weren't coming to synagogue. My guess is they weren't probably decorating or adding a lot to it, which probably means that synagogues didn't have a lot of stuff within them, which kind of is what we know. But I don't know if it's just because of women or also because Jews said, why are we going to invest a lot of money in a synagogue that's going to maybe get torched tomorrow? So that might have been part of it, by the way. I'm not 100% sure, and it's difficult to know. But synagogues oftentimes were not fancy affairs, partly for that reason. Why put the stuff in there when it can get ransacked? It's possibly going to get ransacked tomorrow. So I don't know. I mean, it's difficult.
It might be sexist on my part, but I wonder if women aren't just intrinsically more giving, in that they must give children. They must give to their children, or their children die. And
it could be
from feeding them to everything else. I wonder if it's not a more intrinsic thing.
It could be. And I think that the Midrash at least tells us that it's always been the case. It's been the case from the very first time that there was a Jewish building that the women did it. Now, I'm guessing, and again, this is a guess, but my guess is that when this was written, not long after or around the time that there was actually the second temple, that my guess is that when people brought gifts then, I'm talking about 2,000 years ago, the time of Jesus, let's say, around that time, Greco-Roman period, my guess is that the rabbis who wrote this and the people who lived closer to that period when there actually was a Jewish temple that people brought stuff to because they wanted to decorate it and they wanted to bring value. My guess is that those were women that were bringing more to the temple than men. I can't prove that, and I can't, but my sense is that the reason that this midrash exists is because it was observed behavior. So you could say, well, they're just imagining what it was like when Moses first built the Mishkan. But my guess is that's not the case. My guess is they saw what happened in the temple in Jerusalem and said, yeah, there's a lot of women that come here and bring stuff. Probably did it back then. That's my guess. So I will tell you that my hunch is that this was actually not an imagination. This was observed behavior. So yes, I think that for whatever reason, as Reverend Lynn said, maybe it's inherent. I think that in my experience, and now I've had a decent amount of experience, I can say that it's been my experience as well, that if women see something and they want something for the synagogue, they do it, and men sometimes just go, whatever, that'll be okay. And it is what it is. So I will stand by the truth of this midrash, which is that it's either observed, it's known, or it's always been the case. So they finish it up. Well, we're not quite done because there's actually another one right here.
The work on the tabernacle progressed rapidly, for everything was ready in the month of Kislev, but it was not set up until 3 months later. The people were indeed eager to set up the sanctuary at once and to dedicate it. But God bade Moses wait until the first day of the month of Nisan, because that was Isaac's birthday. And God wished the joy of dedication to take place on this day of joy. The mockers among Israel, of course, to whom this was not known, made fun of Moses, saying, "Of course, Is it possible that the Shekinah should rest over the work of Amram's sons?
Okay, so let's pause right there. There's a whole bunch going on in that. The first is that that this took months. So even if the people brought the stuff fast, the construction still took a long time. And even when it was finished, which it says according to this, it was finished during the winter, they don't actually dedicate it to the beginning of the springtime, which means that, again, it's really like a year later after they got so they're at Mount Sinai, as we know, it's Shavuot. It's not until 6 months later, the following year, whatever, however you want to look at it, even if they began the year then in Nisan, they went a year, almost 10 months from when they were getting the 10 commandments, and a year after they left Egypt is when they finally build the Mishkan. So it's a long time. It's not a quick thing, even when they get everything together. And so this is telling us it took a long time. It also tells us that there were people that didn't believe Moses was really doing God's work when he was building this Mishkan. So that's an interesting midrash. Kind of makes sense, as we're going to see today, is a theme, which is that who told Moses to do all this? There were people who didn't believe that Moses was doing God's work. And then the other piece here is this weird kind of, God wants it to happen during the month of Isaac's birthday, not Abraham, not Jacob, but Isaac. And so, Isaac gets the special reward of having the Mishkan completed in Nisan, in the time of spring. We know that the temple is actually, according to the Book of Kings, the temple is actually dedicated during Sukkot. So it's dedicated during the fall. When Solomon finishes, it's during Sukkot. But finishing it around a holiday is obviously kind of important. And so this is how we come up with this. It does not say in the Torah that this is when it was dedicated, when it was, the date wasn't given, the time of the year, if you will. But it is, if you will, a speculation of, when would be the proper time to dedicate it. And basically what it says here is they actually waited to dedicate it. So kind of interesting that even when it was finished, they didn't dedicate it right away. All right.
In regard to the tabernacle, Moses had to suffer much besides from the fault finders and wicked tongues. If he showed himself upon the street, they called out to one another, "See what a well-fed neck, what sturdy legs the son of Amram has, who eats and drinks our money." The other whispered, "Do you believe that one who has construction of the tabernacle in his hands will remain a poor man?" Moses said nothing, but resolved, as soon as the tabernacle should have been completed, to lay an exact account before the people, which he did. But when it came to giving his account, he forgot one item of 775 shekels, which he had expended for hooks upon which to hang the curtains of the tabernacle. Then, as he suddenly raised his eyes, he saw the Shekinah resting on the hooks and was reminded of his omission of this expenditure. Thereafter, all Israel became convinced that Moses was a faithful and reliable administrator.
Yep. And so this midrash is based on the fact that we get an accounting of what was put into the Mishkan in the portions Vayakel and Pekudei. It's a repetition of Truma and Tetzaveh. So in the first part of the Exodus of the recounting, we have Moses is told what to do. And then in Vayakel Pekudei, you have a virtual repetition of it. And so the rabbis kind of say, why? Why did we have to have that? And the answer that we get here is because the people didn't believe that he was honest about what was being done. And so they actually, he actually makes a mistake, and you have this divine reminder of it. And then the people realized through that Moses was 100% accurate and did everything he said he was supposed to do and didn't misappropriate funds. And so this was really important for the people to see this proof. And so they not only, see the final product, you'd think seeing the final product would prove it to them, but you don't know. But God actually shows them, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, actually shows them. Yeah, Moses had a full accounting of everything. And even when he forgot something, it was still there. So he built stuff, he forgot it. And look, it's here. So it's a confirmation that everything that Moses said he did. And again, it really gets to the point of why do we have it twice? And it is a very repetitious part of the Torah. To read Vayakel and Pekudei after just a few weeks after reading Truman Tetzaveh. And again, Truman Tetzaveh are sometimes double portion, and Vayakel and Pekudei are almost always a joint portion, a doubled up portion. So it's the very end of Exodus. So as we said, there's 5 portions that goes Truma Tetzaveh, Kitisa, and then Vayakel and Pekudei. There's 5 portions in Exodus about the construction of the ark. It's a lot of material. So it's also, again, part that a lot of people's eyes glaze over when they're reading it. And the reason is that, again, it's interesting. It's not, again, the issue of relevance isn't really the issue. The issue is it's actually repetitive. It's actually repeated. And that's the part where people go, so why? And that's why. So Moses is off the hook if in case anybody says, hey, what about that? Well, he did it. He did exactly what he said. So very important. And here we go.
As the people had brought much more material than was necessary for the tabernacle, Moses erected a second tabernacle outside the encampment on the spot where God had been accustomed to reveal himself to him. And this tabernacle of revelation was in all details like the original sanctuary in the camp.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
Yeah.
There's a Midrash that Rosemary just read that they had so much stuff that they actually built a second version of it. Why? Well, because in one place it refers to the tabernacle of revelation, or again, essentially, is it a different place? And so, the obvious answer is it's not a separate place; it's the same thing. But the rabbis kind of derived from this that there was so much stuff that they could actually build 2 versions of it. Now, once you have 2 versions of it, you can have like a backup version. But of course, then you can have something that gets taken, right? You could have if somebody says, well, we know where the tabernacle is, we've got it. You could say, well, you don't have the real one. You have a copy of one, which is exactly what the Ethiopians said happened, right? Because the Ethiopians claim today, the Ethiopic church claims that they have the ark. Now that's from a second version of this copying that was supposedly done during Solomon's time, which was that Solomon had a second version of the ark made for his family from Ethiopia, from the Queen of Sheba. So then Queen of Sheba goes back to Ethiopia with Solomon and Sheba's son Menelik, that they actually, he gave them their own version of the tabernacle for Ethiopia. However, Menelik and Sheba take the original one and leave the Jews back with the fake one. So the answer, of course, is that they believe that the original one is with them, and we had the fake one, and that's the one that got stolen. The one that got taken by the Egyptians or whoever else ended up with the ark. They didn't have the original one. They have the original one. So that's why the Ethiopic church believes that in Axum in Ethiopia, they actually are sitting on the original ark. The one that was the duplicate wasn't the one they took. They took the original. So
in the warehouse.
Yes, that would be they would believe that one was the fake one. But this idea that there would be a second version of this is a really interesting idea, which probably, again, is based on observable situations where people did build. Again, you're going to build a second version of the temple. Well, you're not going to build it right outside the other temple. But if you're going to build a temporary space, a tabernacle, a tent, yeah, it's possible. It's also possible that there was a second ark that people built, as a duplicate copy, or as, again, a show copy that would let people see what it looked like. It's very possible, again, and we know that people did things like that. As a matter of fact, there was a second version of the temple that was built in Egypt. It was in Leontopolis, and we know that they built it. It was built by a rival family of Kohanim who felt that the Kohanim back in Israel were not doing it the way they were supposed to. So they built their own temple of the same kind of temple that they had in Jerusalem. They built a version of that in Egypt. So the amazing thing was there actually were two temples for a while. That temple was destroyed too, but there was a rival temple to the temple in Jerusalem. And again, who would want to go to a temple in Egypt? Well, if you're an Egyptian Jew and you're saying to yourself, hey, I kind of want to offer a sacrifice to God. I can't go all the way back to Israel. I'll do it here. And there probably were people who did it. So, we know that they did it because it functioned for hundreds, not hundreds of years, but for well over 100 years. The temple in Leontopolis was functioning. So there are second versions of things, and it's not impossible that this is also based on the knowledge that the people who wrote this knew that there was a second temple that had been built. Again, most Jews don't know about the temple in Leontopolis, and wasn't written a lot about, but it was done. So it could have been, there could have been a second ark. There actually could have been. All right.
When everything was ready, the people were very much disappointed that the Shekinah did not rest upon their work, and they betook themselves to the wise men who had worked on the erection of the tabernacle, and said to them, why do you sit thus idle? Set up the tabernacle, that the Shekinah may dwell among us. These now attempted to put up the tabernacle, but did not succeed. For hardly did they believe it was up when it fell down again. Now all went to Bezalel and his assistant, Oholiab, saying to them, do you now set up the tabernacle, you who constructed it, and perhaps it will then stand. But when even these two master builders did not succeed in setting up the tabernacle, the people began to find fault and say, see now what the son of Amram has brought upon us. We spent our money and went through a great deal of trouble, all because he assured us that the Holy One, blessed be he, would descend from his place with the angels and dwell among us under the hangings of goat's hair. But it has all been in vain. The people now went to Moses, saying, oh, our teacher Moses, we have done all that you bid us to do. We give all that you asked of us. Look now upon this completed work, and tell us if we have omitted anything or have done anything that we should have refrained from doing. Examine it with care and answer us. Moses had to admit that all had been done according to his instructions. But if it be so, continued the people, why then cannot the tabernacle stand? Bezalel and Oholiab failed to set it up, and all the wise men as well. This communication sorely grieved Moses, who could not understand why the tabernacle could not be set up. But God said to him, you were sorry to have had no share in the erection of the tabernacle, which the people supplied with material, and on which Bezalel, Oholiab, and the other wise men labored with the work of their hands. For this reason did it come to pass that none could set up the tabernacle. For I want all Israel to see that it cannot stand if you do not set it up. Moses replied, O Lord of the world, I do not know how to put it up. But God answered, go get busy with its setting up, and while you are busy at it, it will rise of its own accord. And so it came to pass. Hardly had Moses put his hand upon the tabernacle when it stood erect, and the rumors among the people that Moses had arbitrarily put up the tabernacle without the command of God ceased forevermore.
Okay, so that's kind of a weird.
It's not weird if you've ever struggled to set up a tent.
No, it's if you've ever had to do anything from IKEA. Yeah. The interesting thing is the tabernacle flocking is the IKEA box that the tabernacle came in. There's a bunch of A's and L's on it as well. Umlaut. So no, the tabernacle actually sounds like it's from IKEA. The tabernacle, if you say a tabernacle. The interesting thing about this is there's this passive aggressive thing that happens with Moses, which is that Moses doesn't want it to be put up without his help. And God says, okay, so it won't be able to go up without your help, which again, you know, that is I guess you could say God allows Moses to have his wish. And so the final, so they build everything and all the pieces are lying down on the ground. And then it's a miracle that it all gets assembled. well, wait, I left out the part that Moses then turns to God and says, I can't put it together. I can't do it. And then God says, it's okay. It's gonna miraculously come together by my word. And so it'll all come together. It all happens. And so Moses literally just touches it assembles. It's a miracle. And now people again, Moses, you did this with God's help. So
There's a lot of mistrust of Moses.
Yeah. So I said, that's kind of the theme. The theme for today is Moses. What's going on, Moses, with all that money you raised? It reminds me of this routine that Steve Harvey does about Black churches and the building fund. He goes, and the building fund, I've never seen no building. They don't have so much as a doorknob, and they got the building fund, So we have the same thing in synagogues too. We have the building fund. But I love when Steve Harvey does this whole routine because, he says, I was raised in a really religious home. But I just love the way he says, the building fund. There's no building. They haven't put on a doorknob. He does this whole routine about, people giving money. And of course, in his story, it's also women that are bringing money to the church, like his mom and their friends. But there's, look, it is, it's always, it's never easy. It's never simple trying to figure out how to do this. And I'm laughing out loud now as I think about the fact that, we're considering doing some building or some moving or some work now that we have some money designated for said stuff. And I've been down that road before. So I want to say that I definitely want to help in this, but I also don't want I have to be I'm going to be even more careful than I was last time in helping with this. So I'm going to have even more people involved with it is what I'm going to say. So yes, I mean, it's hard because Moses has to be a leader on this, and I know I have to be a leader on it too, but at the same time I've been down that road before and I don't like it. I as much as I like the responsibility, I also don't want to have that responsibility if stuff doesn't work out either. So that's the tough thing. It's disheartening, let's put it that way. So I will only tell you that I've been not chastened, that's not the right word. I'm wiser today than I was 12 years ago. Anyways, but in all fairness, we tried to build or to move at the very worst time in the American economy. We didn't know that in 2008 and 2009 the economy was going to crater, but that being said, those things happen. So and you don't know if it'll happen again. I mean, the other thing is no one can ever say it can't happen again, because of course it can. We hope we've learned from it, from our economy, but you never know. So if the economy cratered tomorrow, no one would say, oh, I mean, no one should say, oh, I can't believe that happened. Given the fragility of our world economy right now, how can anyone say that? And again, I know there were things that we did to make the last economic crisis worse, but who's to say that we're not doing it now? And you and I and most of us who don't understand a lot about macroeconomics are aware of it today. So I don't want to. I'm smart enough now and wise enough now to say that I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know a lot. So, yeah, I will say that this is a cautionary tale that again, Moses has to deal with the people, as Judith said, and as I warned at the beginning, that people really don't know that this is what even God wants to do. I mean, that's a pretty harsh phrase. Moses had arbitrarily put up the tabernacle without the command of God. I mean, that's insane. I mean, that's literally like you and I would read that and go, how could somebody have written that? They did.
But that's a long-standing controversy. Should the religious community be building magnificent buildings, or should it be helping the poor, that kind of thing?
Well, that's another issue. The weird thing here is, like, this is as I said, it's a pretty critical part of the Torah, which again is part of the reason why we have this midrash, which is that people didn't believe that Moses needed to do it, which is why you have the repetition of it in Vayakel Pekudei, the last parts of Exodus. But so, I mean, this midrash exists because of that, to some extent, to explain that. But you and I reading the Torah know how much of the Torah is dedicated to the construction. We've said this before many times. There's one chapter about the creation of the world. There's 20 chapters about the creation of the Mishkan. So, that's
so it's all just an audit. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's the last two portions. The last two portions are an audit, right? That's what it is. It is an audit. Vayakel means to account. The word Pekudei, sorry, the Vayakel was to assemble, but the Pekudei part is to account. It is the word pakad means to account or to record. And so that's what it is. But, so we take it for granted, and we know how important these structures were, even though we don't have them anymore. But the implication of this midrash is that, again, until that moment, people weren't sure whether this was really divinely directed, because they didn't have the Torah, So they didn't have it in front of them. So we get this. I mean, that's what we get a midrash like that. I mean, it's pretty heavy duty stuff. Again, Moses is just making this up. Crazy. So, so the audit is been done now. And now we essentially, by the way, right now are going into the book of Leviticus. So right here, the end of Pekudei is the accounting. And now we're actually getting into the consecration of the priests, which is Leviticus, the beginning of Leviticus, Vayikra. So here we go.
Before the sanctuary and its vessels were dedicated for service, they were anointed with holy oil. On this occasion, the miracle came to pass. The 12 lugs of oil sufficed not only to anoint the sanctuary and its vessels, and Aaron and his 2 sons throughout the 7 days of their consecration, but with this same oil were anointed all the successors of Aaron in the office of high priest, and several kings until the days of Josiah. And a special miracle occurred when Aaron was anointed, and on his pointed beard 2 drops of holy oil hung pendant like 2 pearls. These drops did not even disappear when he trimmed his beard, but rose to the roots of the hair. Moses at first feared that the useless waste of these drops of holy oil on Aaron's beard might be considered sacrilege, but a divine voice quieted him. A divine voice quieted Aaron also, who likewise feared the accident that had turned the holy oil to his personal use.
Wow. So, well, a couple things there. Basically, this first temple, this Mishkan stuff lasts all the way through the first temple. So until the time of the Babylonians, this stuff works. This stuff is there. This stuff is in the possession. So even after the temple is built, all this stuff is still there. And here's the weird thing, right? Which is that, well, it's all kind of miraculous, but here's the interesting thing here is that the holy oil that's put on Aaron in particular stay on him. And it's kind of like further enhancing the miracle of this moment, that the oil, when it's on Aaron's beard, literally stays like pearls and doesn't get cut off. And Moses isn't sure whether it's okay. And God says it's okay. This miracle, this cool little miracle, and you can have that image of the oil, on Aaron's beard, that image on the beard of Aaron, kind of a cool image, those oil droplets. Interesting, right? So, but again, you can see that they're upset whether this is going to be considered personal use. Whether the oil that's on Aaron's beard is not, it's now his, it's now, if it's not all doing the purpose of purifying him, making him holy. So the oil is the anointing oil that was used, which is described in Leviticus. And it's not just for Aaron, of course, it's for his family.
The anointing of Aaron and his 2 sons was not the only ceremony that consecrated them as priests, for during a whole week did they have to live near the tabernacle, secluded from the outer world. During this time, Moses performed all priestly duties, even bringing sacrifices for Aaron and his sons, and sprinkling them with the blood of these sacrifices. It was on the 23rd day of Adar that God bade Moses consecrate Aaron and his sons as priests, saying to him, "Go, persuade Aaron to accept his priestly office, for he is a man who shuns distinctions. But effect his appointment before all Israel, that he may be honored in this way, and at the same time warn the people that after the choice of Aaron, none may assume priestly rights. Gather you all the congregation together to the door of the tabernacle." At these last words, Moses exclaimed, "O Lord of the world, how shall I be able to assemble before the door of the tabernacle, a space that measures only 2 seah, 60 myriads of adult men and as many youths?" But God answered, "Do you marvel at this? Greater miracles than this have I accomplished. The heaven was originally as thin and as small as the retina of the eye. Still, I caused it to stretch over all the world from one end to the other. In the future world, too, when all men from Adam to the time of the resurrection will be assembled in Zion, and the multitude will be so great that one shall call to the other, 'The place is too strait for me. Give place to me that I may dwell.' On that day will I so extend the holy city that all will conveniently find room there."
Wow. So what is going on in this midrash? What is going on here, folks? Look, you can see that when when God tells Moses to assemble all the people together by the doors of the tabernacle, or by the Mishkan, that Moses says, you can't do that. There's not enough space. There's not enough people. There's not enough room for people. How are you going to get 600,000 adults into this, adult males into this area? And so God says, "Oh, I can do that. I can do things like this. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Don't you know what I can do?" The heavens were only as thin as a retina. By the way, what a crazy image that is, right? Think about that image. That they knew how, well, obviously they probably did autopsies and things like that. So they knew how thin things were, but as part of the body, but it's quite an image. Somebody I'm sure can find out how thin a retina is right now, but think about it. I mean, they're literally saying there is no, heaven was that thin. Which, by the way, is really kind of almost an interesting scientific thing. I mean, I don't want to press it, but I mean, do you see that this is kind of like almost saying that the heavens at one point were like, maybe I'm being too scientific, but it's almost like a Big Bang. I mean, in a sense, right? Aren't they saying that this is? Aren't they saying that this is the equivalent of like a Big Bang? Right? It is.
That's certainly a vast extension, sudden extension.
Right. So I think there's this weird kind of recognition that the universe, when God makes things happen, God can make, God can blow up a space into
0.5 millimeter.
There you go.
According to Wikipedia.
So that's pretty wild that they even threw that out there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that to me is at least, that's kind of amazing to me that they recognize that there was like some kind of, there was some kind of recognition about that. And I just like where does that even come? Like part of me doesn't even understand how they knew that, like how they would even come up with that. So I don't know. When I read those kinds of things, I'm like, well, where did they get that from? Like where, like how are they even have like thought of that? And where does that come from? Where does that kind of idea come from? So anyways, so they do this. And so then that leads, okay, that's where it started. And think about what happens in the future. Every human being, well, I guess it's everybody who's going to be resurrected is going to be able to come to Jerusalem. And I'll make it happen. I can do things like that. So just like I made heaven out of you said 0.5 millimeter?
0.5 millimeter.
Just like I made heaven out of 0.5 millimeter. And I made the temple accommodate, the Mishkan accommodate that. In the future, there's going to be billions of people, and I'm all going to make them be able to come into Jerusalem. So it's an amazing idea, which again is that's what God can do. God can make these things, can collapse and expand space, can do that. So it's kind of I don't know, it's kind of an interesting vision of what God can do, with space, with physical space. All right, let's keep going.
Moses did as he was bidden, and in the presence of all the people took place the election of Aaron and his sons as priests, whereupon these retired for a week to the door of the tabernacle. During this week, in preparing the burnt offering and the sin offering, Moses showed his brother Aaron and Aaron's sons how to perform the different priestly functions in the sanctuary. Moses made a sin offering because he feared that among the gifts out of which the sanctuary had been constructed, there might have been ill-gotten gains, and God loves justice and hates loot as an offering. Moses, through a sin offering, sought to obtain forgiveness for a possible wrong. During this week, however, the sanctuary was only temporarily used. Moses would set it up mornings and evenings, then fold it together again, and it was not until this week had passed that the sanctuary was committed to the general use. After that, it was not folded together, except when they moved from one encampment to another. These 7 days of retirement were assigned to Aaron and his sons, not only as a preparation for their regular service, they had another significance also. God, before bringing the flood upon the earth, observed the 7 days preceding as a week of mourning, and in the same way, he bade Aaron and his sons live in absolute retirement for a week, as is the duty of mourners, for a heavy loss awaited them, the death of Nadav and Avihu, which took place on the joyous day of their dedication.
Yeah. So here's a weird midrash. We read in the third portion of Leviticus that Nadav and Avihu were killed on the 8th day. And so the midrash is all based on this idea of why did they have to wait 8 days to dedicate the temple. So they dedicate the Mishkan, they have the first day, and then they wait a week, and then they then do everything on the 8th day, and the 8th day is when this stuff happens. So on one hand, the rabbis say, well, that's because the first week was a soft opening, if you will. And it really is that kind of idea of a soft opening, which is that they kind of have to figure out how to make all this work. And so it's kind of a preparation time. Okay, well, once they open that up, which kind of makes sense. He says, they didn't they didn't use it for the first week. This is what we're left with. We know that they didn't. Again, I mean, the analogy of a soft opening is really important, which is that they want to make sure, and it's kind of weird. I mean, it's kind of like what we're dealing with now when we reopen, which is we're going to gradually reopen and take some steps with it. So once they open that up once they throw that out there, they say, well, yeah, but remember, on the 8th day, Nadav and Abihu are going to die. Now they don't know that. Aaron doesn't know it. Moses doesn't know it, but God knows it. And so what this midrash basically tells us is that God gave them a week because of what they're about to get hit with is so bad. And because of that, God doesn't have them go right in and do stuff right away. So they need that week, gives them a chance, because otherwise Nadav and Avihu would have gone on the second day and everything would have blown up the second day. And so a week actually gives them a chance to prepare, even though they don't know they're preparing for it. God gives human beings a chance to prepare for when it's going to hit the fan. And so when do they say that this happened? During the flood. That God waits a week, has the people, they get a week before the flood to kind of deal with the fact that it's all going to go down. Now, it doesn't exactly say that in the Torah, but this idea that Noah didn't go right away, that he's in the ark for a week as they're waiting for everything to happen, isn't so much for Noah, but for everybody else. And it's essentially, again, it's almost like a Shiva. It's a pre-Shiva, if you will. 7 days preceding as a week of mourning. So it's a pre-Shiva, if you will. So God can do those kind of things because God knows when death is coming, but human beings don't have that knowledge. And so sometimes God helps us by giving us a chance to rest, to essentially have the calm before the storm. And of course, then we are supposed to have it afterwards too. We're supposed to have a week of Shiva afterwards, right? But again, sometimes God does that. At least according to this Midrash, sometimes God gives us a chance to rest before we get hit with this. I can only tell you that sometimes that does happen. It doesn't happen every time, so I can't tell you that, why it happens, but sometimes it happens. Sometimes people have a week of relative calm with their loved one before their loved one dies. And they say, oh, maybe things are going to get better. And you kind of get lulled into a feeling like maybe things are okay. And it turns out they're not. And, sometimes people say that's just a way of somebody kind of shutting down and not having their family have to go in, having every day be a disaster before the final day. So it does happen. So I can only tell you that sometimes we misinterpret it as no, they're getting better, and it's not. So yeah, that's what happens here. It's a pre-Shiva, but again, only God can give us those pre-Shivas. And again, I don't know. You and I don't know why sometimes we get that and sometimes we don't. All right, so we're going to finish up with this section right here, and then we're going to leave. But this is the beginning of Leviticus. This is dedication day, opening day, ordination day.
The first day of Nisan was an eventful day, a day that was distinguished by 10 crowns. It was the day on which the princes of the tribes began to bring their offerings. It was the first day on which the Shekinah came to dwell among Israel, the first day on which sacrifice on any but the appointed place was forbidden, the first day on which priests bestowed their blessing upon Israel, the first day for regular sacrificial service, the first day on which the priests partook of certain portions of the offering, the first day on which the heavenly fire was seen on the altar. It was besides the first day of the week, a Sunday, the first day of the first month of the year.
Yeah, and so this goes back to the idea that Nisan, springtime, is the beginning of the year. And it was on the first day of the week, on a Sunday. So everything good was happening on that day. Look at all these great things that they got. They got the first sacrifices. They got the first time that they're told they only can offer a sacrifice in one place, which of course is eventually going to be Jerusalem, but it's set forward here at the Mishkan. We only can do it in one place. All these great things that happen on this day, on this eventful day, a day, as they say, of 10 crowns, of 10 special things that happen on this day, on the first of Nisan, the day that we're going to do the first sacrifices. Here it goes.
It was on this day, after the week of training for Aaron and his sons, that God said to Moses, "Think you that you are to be high priest because you have been attending to priestly duties during this week? Not so. Call Aaron and announce to him that he has been appointed high priest, and at the same time call the elders and in their presence announce his elevation to this dignity, that none may say Aaron himself assumed this dignity." Following the example of God, who on Sinai distinguished Aaron before all others, saying, "And you shall come up, you and Aaron with you, but let not the priests and the people break through." Moses went first to Aaron, then to Aaron's sons, and only then to the elders to discuss with them the preparations for the installation of Aaron into office.
Yeah.
When Moses approached,
So this is the 8th day. This is the ordination day. This is Shmini. This is the day that we're going to see everything go down. So they have one day, then they have a week of training, and now it's the first day of business. It's the 8th day.
When Moses approached Aaron with the news of God's commission to appoint him as high priest, Aaron said, "What? You had all the labor of erecting the tabernacle, and I am now to be its high priest." But Moses replied, "As truly as you live, Although you are to be high priest, I am as happy as if I had been chosen myself. As you did rejoice in my elevation, so do I now rejoice in yours." Moses continued, "My brother Aaron, although God had become reconciled to Israel and has forgiven them their sin, still through your offering must you close the mouth of Shaitan, that he may not hate you when you enter the sanctuary. Take then a young calf as a sin offering, for as you did nearly lose your claim to the dignity of high priest through a calf, so shall you now, through the sacrifice of a calf, be established in your dignity." Then Moses turned to the people, saying, "You have two sins to atone for: the selling of Joseph, whose coat your father smeared with the blood of a kid to convince their father that its owner had been torn to pieces by a wild beast, and the sin you committed through the worship of the golden calf. Take then a kid to atone for the guilt you brought upon yourselves with a kid, and take a calf to atone for the sin you committed through a calf. But to make sure that God had become reconciled to you, offer up a bull also, and thereby acknowledge that you are slaughtering before God your idol, the bull that you had erstwhile worshipped." The people, however, said to Moses, "What avails it this nation to do homage to its king who is invisible?" Moses replied, "For this very reason did God command you to offer these sacrifices, so that he may show himself to you." At these words, they rejoiced greatly, for through them they knew that God was now completely reconciled to them, and they hastened to bring the offerings to the sanctuary. Moses admonished them with the words, "See to it now that you drive evil impulse from your hearts, that you now have but one thought and one resolution, to serve God, and that your undivided services are devoted singly and solely to the one God, for he is the God of gods and the Lord of lords. If you will act according to my words, the glory of the Lord shall appear unto you."
Yep. So here they offer up sacrifices. And of course, the sacrifices, the animals that they sacrifice are interesting because as the rabbis point out here in this Midrash, there is a goat and then there is a calf. There's a bull. There's a cow animal. So a goat animal and a cow animal type animal. What do those represent? Two sins, right? The sin of selling Joseph, which still is on all the Israelites, all the tribes, with the exception of Joseph, right? All the other tribes are stained by that, and they use the blood of a goat, a kid, on the garment, right? And so as they ripped toward the garment and put blood on it, by killing a goat, they're making up for that sin. And what are they doing also? They're also killing a cow for the sin of the golden calf. And so both of those sins are there's expiation for this. Before they even do anything more, the Israelites have to atone for these two sins. And so these things are done first before they can do anything else. Of course, this Midrash also teaches us that Moses isn't going to be the guy in charge in the temple. Aaron and his family will. And Aaron, in his humility, says, what, wouldn't I get to do this? I shouldn't be the one that gets to do it. And Moses says, listen, you are the one who's going to do it. And I got to do things, and now you get to do things. But you need to make up for the golden calf too. And so that's why the high priest also has to sacrifice a bull. And so Aaron must feel really good now that, again, he gets to, and his sons after him get to be the ones in charge. Not Moses, but he gets to. And according to this, Moses, again, in his humility, says, I'm very okay with it, Aaron. I feel good that you get to do it. So at least according to the rabbinic understanding, it's all good with Moses. But it's not so simple, because Aaron is not really sure he's ready to do this.
But Aaron, in his humility, still did not dare to enter on his priestly activities. The aspect of the horned altar filled him with fear, for it reminded him of the worship of the bull by Israel, an incident in which he felt he had not been altogether without blame. Moses had to encourage him to step up to the altar and offer the sacrifices. After Aaron had offered up the prescribed sacrifices, he bestowed his blessing upon the people with lifted hands, saying, "The Eternal bless you and keep you. The Eternal make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Eternal lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace."
So that is the Birkat Kohanim, right? That is the prayer that we say when we say it on Shabbat to our families. It's the blessing that it says in Numbers, but here it's essentially Aaron got to say it immediately from the very beginning. He gets to say it, so he's always saying it, if you will. This is Moses's. This is Aaron's kind of moment to shine. But he's not ready. He's not sure he's ready. He's not sure he can do this. And so, through doing this, the next part happens.
In spite of the offerings and the blessings, there was still no sign of the Shekhinah, so that Aaron, with a heavy heart, thought, "God is angry with me, and it is my fault that the Shekhinah had not descended among Israel. I merely owe it to my brother Moses that to my confusion I entered the sanctuary, for my service did not suffice to bring down the Shekhinah." Upon this, Moses went with his brother into the sanctuary a second time, and their united prayers had the desired effect. There came a fire out from before the Lord and consumed upon the altar well nigh 116 years, and neither was the wood of the altar consumed, nor its brazen overlay molted.
Wow. So this altar is essentially, again, going to be good for the entire time until they build the new altar in Jerusalem during the time of King Solomon. And so it is ready to go when the Shekhinah is brought over by Moses and Aaron praying together. Now, what do the people take away from this? Obviously, is very important.
When the people saw the heavenly fire, the evident token of God's grace and his reconciliation with them, they shouted and fell on their faces and praised God, intoning in his honor a song of praise. Joy reigned not only on earth, but in heaven also. For on this day, God's joy over the erection of the sanctuary was as great as it had been his joy on the first day of creation over his works, heaven and earth. For in a certain sense, the erection of the tabernacle was the finishing touch to the creation of the world. For the world exists for the sake of three things: the Torah, divine service, and works of love. From the creation of the world to the revelation on Sinai, the world owed its existence to the love and it's not grave, something of God. From the revelation to the erection of the sanctuary, the word owed a grace, that's what it is, the love and grace of God. From the revelation to the erection of the sanctuary, the world owed its existence to the Torah and to love. But only with the erection of the tabernacle did the world secure its firm basis, for now it had 3 feet whereupon to rest: the Torah, divine service, and love. From another point of view, too, is the day of consecration of the sanctuary to be reckoned with the days of creation. For at the creation of the world, God dwelt with mortals and withdrew the Shekhinah to heaven only on account of the sin of the first 2 human beings. But on the day of consecration of the tabernacle, the Shekhinah returned to its former abode, the earth. The angels therefore lamented on this day, saying, "Now God will leave the celestial hosts and will dwell among mortals." God indeed quieted them with the words, "As truly as you live, my true dwelling will remain on high." But he was not quite in earnest when he said so, for truly earth is his chief abode. Only after the tabernacle on earth had been erected did God command the angels to build one like it in heaven. And it is this tabernacle in which Metatron offers the souls of the pious before God as an expiation for Israel at the time of the exile when his earthly sanctuary is destroyed.
Okay, so that's a really weird.
That is really weird. God is lying to angels.
Yes, and so the angels though want the Shekhinah up with them. They don't want it on earth. Though, according to this Midrash, that's where the Shekhinah was always supposed to be. That's where the Shekhinah resides normally, should be. The Shekhinah is not there now. The Shekhinah is up in heaven, and that's where it is now. But that's only because it's not where it really wants to be, which is here on earth. It's a very interesting Midrash too, because in this case, according to this, the heavenly temple wasn't even built until this one was built. And Metatron, the chief angel, the extra highest angel, if you will, he gets to be in the heavenly tabernacle. And what does he do there? He offers the souls of the pious. That's a strange image. Because it's based on this idea. What do angels offer as a sacrifice? If there's a heavenly temple and there are angels doing stuff there, what are they offering? And according to this, the angel, or at least the angel in charge, the high priest angel, if you will, which is Metatron, he offers the souls of the pious. And what they do is they keep us alive, because to make up for our mistakes, these righteous people are essentially offered up. I mean, that's what you just read. This is a martyr. This is a reflection. This is a meditation on martyrdom. That's what it just said. I mean, that's what we just read. That this is a literal, they are the sacrifice. It's pretty wild. I mean, it's a pretty wild idea that's what those souls, that's the function of those souls. They are the sacrifice in heaven for us. All right. We're going to finish with these last couple of paragraphs and then I got to run. Crazy. Yep.
This day marks an important change in the intercourse between God and Moses. Before this, the voice of God would strike Moses' ear as if conducted through a tube, and on such an occasion, the outer world recognized only through Moses' reddened face that he was receiving a revelation. Now, at the consecration of the sanctuary, this was changed. For when on this day he entered the sanctuary, a sweet, pleasant, and lovely voice rang out toward him, whereupon he said, I will hear what God the Lord will speak. Then he heard the words, formerly there reigned enmity between me and my children. Formerly there reigned anger between me and my children. Formerly there reigned hatred between me and my children. But now love reigns between me and my children. Friendship reigns between me and my children. Peace reigns between me and my children. It was evident that peace reigned, for on this day the undisturbed freedom of movement over the world, which had until then been accorded the demons, was taken from them. Until then, these were so frequently met with that Moses regularly recited a special prayer whenever going to Mount Sinai, entreating God to protect him from the demons. But as soon as the tabernacle had been erected, they vanished. Not entirely, it is true, for even now these pernicious creatures may kill a person, especially within the period from the 17th day of Tammuz to the 9th day of Av, when the demons exercise their power. The most dangerous one among them is Ketav, the sight of whom kill men as well as animals. He rolls like a ball and had the head of a calf with a single horn on his forehead.
So let's read the last paragraph.
You'll have to scroll.
Oh, sorry. I'm on another page. Yeah, on this other page. Yeah, go ahead.
Just as God destroyed the power of these demons through the tabernacle, so did through the priestly blessing that he bestowed upon his people before the consecration of the sanctuary, did he break the spell of the evil eye, which might otherwise have harmed them now, as it had done at the revelation on Sinai. The great ceremonies on that occasion had turned the eyes of all the world upon Israel, and the evil eye of the nations brought about the circumstance of the breaking of the two tables. As God blessed his people on this occasion, so too did Moses, who upon the completion of the tabernacle blessed Israel with the words, "The eternal God of your fathers make you 1,000 times so many more as you are, and bless you as he has promised you." The people made answer to this blessing, saying, "Let the beauty of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish you the work of our hands upon us. Yes, the work of our hands, establish you it."
Yeah, which is words from the Psalms. Okay, so
Is-
yeah.
So the enmity between God and the people was nullified after the building of the temple?
Yeah, which is strange, of course, because as you're going to say, so again, it doesn't end.
Right.
And of course, the people mess up in the Torah portion we just read in Shlach in Numbers, where the people send in the spies and then they're not allowed to come in. I mean, it's not over, but there's this understanding that like at this moment, it's over and this is a fresh start. Now, again, they mess up again. And so, the question is like, well, are we going to, or do we go back to this? And again, the answer could be yes, but through the temple, we have the ability for essentially when the temple stands and when the temple, it's proof of God's love for us and the fact that these things will happen, that God will have, there'll be friendship between us and God, there'll be peace with us and God, that all these good things will happen as long as the temple's there. When the temple is destroyed, that's proof that it's not going to be there. And so it becomes like an example of the temple becomes an example of God's relationship with us, that when that's in one piece, our relationship's in one piece. But again, it doesn't explain why it doesn't get destroyed every time we screw up, but there is like a proof in its existence that the relationship is good. And what happens, of course, is that demons don't get their powers get taken. The demons get their powers taken away. Well, and then they say, but not quite, because we know that demons are still in power, but maybe they used to be in power a whole lot more, and now they're not able to be in power as much. And so here, we get a little bit of the superstitions about demons, and specifically about a little warning that what really gets bad around a certain time of year when we're in the time when the temple was destroyed by the Babylonians and later by the Romans. That's a really bad time. That's a bad time of year, and demons are especially active during those times. So just know that during those months, that's like kind of the end of July, beginning of August, usually around that time, July to August time, that's not a good time. It's a time where the satanic forces are especially powerful. So the demons could even get to Moses.
Out in any way?
What
is that borne out in theology, or is that borne out in
it's borne out by the fact that I don't like living in LA during that time. It's about 105 degrees. It's close to hell you can get. But that's I can only tell you it's not a good time to be in Israel, by the way, either. If any of I never encourage travel during the time of during the month of Tammuz, during that end of the 17th of Tammuz to the 9th of Av, which, by the way, just so you know, this year is July 27th to August the 17th. For those that 3 week period would not be great weather usually in Israel either. But it's a nasty time around here. But I think it's, look, it was a hot time in Israel, and people would probably say it's not a good time for animals as well as people and animals are at risk during that time. So it doesn't surprise me that they had legends about this. But yeah, that period of time is considered to be a time of not being a celebratory period. People traditionally don't have weddings during that time or celebrations or parties. And there are people who won't even swim. Orthodox Jews won't even go to the pool during that time, which is the exact time you want to go to the pool. But there are people who won't go swimming until after the 9th of Av. So that 3-week period is also a prime marriage time normally, July to August. And so there are people who won't even do marriages during that time. So it is a still, I wouldn't say enforced, but it's definitely still something that you'll see it is enforced in the Orthodox world because they don't allow weddings during that time. But it also is, it's based on this idea. And 17th of Tammuz was when the walls of Jerusalem, the outer walls of Jerusalem, the city, were breached. And then, of course, Tisha B'Av, 3 weeks later, was when the temple was actually destroyed by the Babylonians. But that 3-week period is a period of reflection and sadness. I mean, look, we have a lot of periods of reflection and sadness in Judaism. This one is more on national destruction. This 3-week period, it became a part of our history, and the 17th of Tammuz is a fast day. It actually isn't done by many Jews, but it is one of the fast days that's associated with Tisha B'Av, with the destruction of the temple. So it is still considered to be a sad day on the calendar. So if you ever see Tzom Tammuz, that's the fast of Tammuz. That's the 17th of Tammuz. So these are still days that there are people who recognize and who, however you want to describe it, they see it as a period you got to be careful. And again, look, it's a good thing that happens during this period. But of course, as we know, and I don't want to ruin it for you, but interrupted joy, where we're going to come next time, is the death of Nadav and Avihu. So on this day that was supposed to be a day of celebration for Aaron, and particularly, as you're going to see, his wife. A lot of people want to know what Aaron's wife's name is. It's Elisheva. For Elisheva, it is not a good day. For Aaron, it's not a good day. For their family, it's not a good day. Their brother, son, uncle is going to die, or the uncles are going to die. So
my birthday is right during that time. I mean, I think it's been August.
Don, what do you want? My birthday's during my birthday's during that time. I'm born on the 1st of Av.
A double whammy.
Yeah. July 26th is my birthday on the English secular calendar, and Av, the 1st of Av on the secular calendar. So on the Jewish calendar. But listen, according to tradition, there's a wonderful tradition that the Moshiach is born. The Messiah is born during Av as well. So, or maybe born on Tisha B'Av on the 9th of Av. So there's a tradition that our hope, our time of possible redemption also happens in Av as well. So
yeah, that's a positive spin. That's great.
All right, everybody, please stay healthy and positive and good, and again, I look forward to seeing everybody coming up soon. And thank you, everybody. We had a great service Friday, and we hope to see you the next time we do it live on July 9th. We're going to have another service indoors. So
That'd be great.
We'll see you soon, everybody. Take care.
All right.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Rosemary.